One, and we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Wheel Talk. Hello, Brittany. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Fred? Busy
I'm very
day
well.
today.
Yeah, your households, like, the little before we were having the preamble, there sounded like a rumble in the house that there wasn't usually. So it sounds like there's a lot of
Yeah.
people home at yours.
Yeah. Jacob was like talking to me and didn't realize I was getting ready for my YouTube live. And then he came in here to see what was happening. And he's like, oh, he's already on there.
Ah,
So,
okay. There you go. That was him, was it? Hello,
yeah, it
hello,
was
Jacob.
funny.
Um, yeah. All right. Cool. So should we get cracking?
Yeah, let's get cracking.
So, I want to talk about Luigi Mangione, which is the CEO killer, the cold-blooded, handsome assassin, which the internet is going crazy for at the moment. And I
Yeah.
just wanted to ask, first of all, open it up to the comments section. If you live in the US and you've had a negative experience with healthcare and insurance, let us know. Let us know your story. I'd love to. I'd love to know more about that. I'm all
Uh-oh. You frozen. He's going to come back. I'll try and finish his sentence. If you've had a negative experience with healthcare, let us know in the comments. I know that there's lots of people tuning in from the US, at least that have messaged me privately about their negative experiences with subpar healthcare or just not having coverage in the US. So if you have any of those experiences, let us know.
I'm back in the
Yeah,
room.
you're
Sorry.
back. That's okay.
If you've had a negative experience with Starlink, let us know because mine keeps being really intermittent. It's really annoying, frustrating. Sorry, I'm pretty sure you picked up where I left off.
I
So
did.
I wanted to just feel the temperature in the room. What are we feeling? Because I know that the internet has kind of got behind this guy and painted him as a bit of a hero. Doesn't help that he's like very easy on the eye, so there's a bit of prissy privilege there. But yeah, I mean, how are we feeling? About Luigi Mangione.
So to be honest, I never really watched the news. So I was like, as soon as you wanted to talk about this, I'm like, oh, I better go like figure out what the internet is saying about him. Because at the time when like 2 weeks ago, I think it was when he first got shot, all I had heard was, the three words on the bullet casing and that they hadn't really found him. And when you actually read about this guy, like he lived a life of privilege, he was extremely intelligent, he was valedictorian, kind, always doing things to like help people and try and make himself and the people around him better. So it's interesting when you have some background on this individual, no history of mental illness or mental health kind of problems that people typically associate with crazy acts like this. And so it seems like a case of vigilantism where like
Mm,
he is doing something to make a larger statement about something that's very wrong in the world, which I think is an interesting concept because I do believe that something can be wrong legally and ethically and morally correct. Like I watched a movie a long time ago with Matthew McConaughey on the AIDS crisis, and he was basically like selling drugs on the black market that were otherwise extremely expensive for AIDS patients to afford. And he changed lives. Like it was, and he is a hero to many families and many people. And yet he was doing something legally wrong.
mm,
And so it's like a larger conversation that I think is now being had about what is potentially wrong with insurance companies and stuff. Because if you look, like I'm into investing and I look at, um, investor relations sort of pages on insurance companies and different things like that. They're not doing well, and they do care about their shareholders returns and all of that stuff, and the way they get that is by a whole bunch of people never ever using their service and paying into it. And
mm.
so as a person who requires medical supplies and things like that, it's extremely frustrating to me when they try and deny the stupidest things. Like as an example, I just had one of my insurance claims for my monthly supplies held up over a $9 charge for lubricant. So they didn't care to like contest the $1,000 worth of catheters because it's clearly stated that they have to cover catheters, but all these other little things that they can, get away with not covering.
Mm.
And they've been covering it for like 10 years. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, now we're not going to cover the lubricant. So you can just put the catheter in dry. Not that I use hydrophilic catheters, so it doesn't matter. But insurance companies are notorious for that. They will automatically turn you down, just like the 3 words on the bullet casing. Like that's their protocol. It's just deny and then whatever that middle word was, I can't remember. But so yeah, I think it's frustrating. I don't know whether it's ever right in my mind to kill somebody that
Yeah.
is like, we live in North America, but if somebody told me, I never shed a tear for like anybody in the Middle East when the war on terrorism was happening, when I was a kid. I was never like, yeah, don't kill the with Osama bin Laden. I wasn't like, don't kill him. I wasn't like, he has a family, his kids are going to suffer. I didn't think of that, but you do think that when it's somebody in North America. So it's hard.
Yeah.
It's a really hard conversation.
I think it's definitely opened up a broader perspective, and it's opened up a conversation that a lot of people are interested in. For example, there's a real perverse incentive for the health for people to provide healthcare and insurance, and basically prioritize profit over patients. That's what they're literally prioritizing profit, and that directly affects the healthcare that people are paying into. I heard a statistic that the United Healthcare profit on average $1,600 for every one that pays into it. So that's how much they profit off. So like that is becoming from denying healthcare. It's a real perverse incentive. Prioritizing shareholders is just, I'm definitely not an anti-capitalist, but I just think that healthcare is one of those things that just really should be set up differently. And I think this guy Luigi, he had some back pain, some chronic back pain, which I think a lot of us listening to can relate to. So yeah, imagine having like, you don't have to imagine too hard, chronic nerve pain, chronic back pain, and then just again being intelligent enough to be filled with these ideas and sort of wanting to sort of get one over on the man. And I think the way he did it and just the whole narrative of the story is very enticing, and it's captivating.
You froze again. It is captivating. It's a very captivating story.
This young vigilante. Oh, sorry, did I cut out again?
Yeah, you cut out a little bit, but it is. It's like Robin Hood, Batman. We're fascinated by characters in society that rob from the rich and give to the poor and do all these things, and we love to hate. We love to hate people that are in positions of power and authority, especially ones that take advantage, we feel, of people that are poor, sick, any of those things, right? And it is really hard because like I have limiting beliefs about money because of these like narratives in society. I have limiting beliefs that if you profit from anything, then you are taking advantage of people, which is really hard for me because I ultimately want to be a rehab coach. I want to help people that are actually newly injured in the hospital, and I want to help them do a better job than what their healthcare providers can do because they never had a spinal cord injury before. I want to help them set goals. I want to help them talk to their care teams in a way that actually allows them to achieve their goals. All those things, but I have a really hard time profiting from people that are in a hard situation. But I have zero problems going to like, say if I needed like to go to a psychologist, I have zero problems. And I would never think twice about paying $200 an hour. Like I'm just like, oh, that's just what they charge. And I don't think they're a douchebag for it, but it's really hard in situations when people are sick and dying. Doctors definitely charge for their services. People need to charge for their services. So I don't think that that's a problem, but I do think prioritizing profits and ultimately like pharmaceutical industries, insurance companies, they want to keep people hurt and sick. You know what I mean? Because like pharmaceutical companies, the sicker people are, the more money they make. So they don't care whether people are sick. They're just like, yeah, just keep buying my drugs. They don't want to cure people in any way. And insurance companies, they don't want to give people their like money for their claims that they rightfully paid for, in order to, claim. So I don't know. It's a really hard, yeah. They're kind of like the evil, necessary evils. But I know that I live in Canada and we have universal health care, and there's lots of problems with it for
Mm,
sure. And there's lots of like fighting, but I feel like it's not a partisan issue in Canada. No one party is like, we should privatize healthcare. That's really never a
mm.
conversation. There is some conversation in terms of privatizing certain aspects of healthcare that are just, not in the best interest maybe of the government to fund anymore. But it's never like a acute care thing that some people should be able to pay and some people shouldn't, because then again, you get like a hierarchy of care. Somebody that can come in and pay
Mm.
gets better care than somebody that can't. And I think that is bad. Like you shouldn't have to be like, I'm not going to feed my children because I have to pay for healthcare if they get sick. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of people would never choose that. They would be like, obviously, I'm going to feed my kid, and then hopefully they don't get sick. But if they do get sick, they're going to get really shitty care. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So since this story's come out, I've heard loads of like anecdotes from people. Like for example, there was this one woman who had a she was already paying I think 1,200 a month. 1,200 a month is bonkers for a family of four, I think, for health insurance. That is just mind-boggling for me because I've lived in the UK, I've lived in loads of places where healthcare is free. Um, and then her daughter got diabetes, which and then the healthcare were like, oh yeah, we don't cover that, and you have to pay an extra 4,000 a month for the diabetes treatment, and then she was so that's like 5,200 a month, and they're like, how is a family of four just gonna afford that? And I was just thought that is so crazy how and that was just like a drop in the water. There was so many different ones that was like actually quite mild compared
Mhm.
to some of them where one lady was 9 months pregnant and then had a 1 year old which needed treatment, and the one of the what's the word I'm looking for, tactics that they use
Mhm.
is delay, and delay, deny, defend or whatever. And so they were like delaying this treatment for this young girl who had a brain tumor and she needed to get to another hospital. But they said, and she was like, I'll just drive to the other hospital. And she was like, if you leave the hospital, that's it, your cover's done. So they stayed in the hospital for 3 days before they processed the claim to get an ambulance to the other hospital, almost killing her daughter, because they didn't want to, that's just part of their tactics. And she was already 9 months pregnant, so it was a heavily stressful time for them. And I just thought, man, it's like, again, it's so bonkers. And what baffles me is that there are people in America that like think socialized healthcare is nuts. They're like, we don't want socialized healthcare, and I'm like, why would you not want socialized healthcare? It's bonkers. Like the healthcare here is so crazy. I've heard Americans say like, oh yeah, you try and go to Europe and find a doctor, and I'm like, are you crazy? Have you ever been to Europe?
Yeah. I know. I think people just don't know. I don't think people know what it's like to live in other countries that
Oh,
have.
sorry, I'm back
It's okay.
again.
It's
The
okay. I picked up where you left off. I think people just don't know what it's like to live anywhere else, and so especially if they are one of the privileged, and I'm using that word just to mean that you don't know what it's like on the other side of that privilege. So if you think that the healthcare in the US is awesome, then you must A, be able to pay for it, and B, have gotten great care, both of which are a privilege. So I have been privileged in Canada. I have never seen really the negative side of healthcare here. Of course, I've had like some shitty nurses and some, like last time I went in for surgery, they didn't really know how to help me with my bowel routine and stuff. So like Joe had to help me after my surgery. And it was almost like, what, you're a nurse? Like, so I've had stuff
mm,
like that, but I've never had really bad care when I've had like my syrinx that I'm dealing with, that I've been dealing with for like 20 years. Um, it's, I don't know if I talked about it on here, but it's basically like a cyst in your spinal cord.
mhm.
And they monitor it all the time because it can affect my hand function. And so that I get regular care for. I have no problem seeing neurology, physiatry. Like I have a whole team of doctors that monitor my symptoms. And if I need an MRI like fast, then I can get that. So if it's like urgent type stuff, At like I had a cancer like scare once, and I got into the cancer center like within like a week, and I had my tests done within like 2 weeks. And I know that there are people that seem to fall through the cracks, like where they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And I don't really know what happens in those cases, but it's never happened to me in Canada. I've never had to worry about finding a family doctor, which I know people struggle with. But I have, my kids have a pediatrician, I have a family doctor, I have people like my whole care team for spinal cord injury. So I don't know what that would be like to not have. But yeah, socialized healthcare to me is amazing because yes, there might be things like if you need a shoulder replacement or something that isn't super urgent, that causes you chronic pain, and that there's a long list of people in front of you for, it might suck because you're waiting 2 years to even get seen by a specialist. But if you have something urgent with socialized healthcare, like you are generally not going to wait a ton of time to get care. And that's just my experience. So I might be totally wrong, but Alberta is its own thing. So every province in Canada has their own thing. So I know that every province funds and manages their own health programs. So Alberta's great, in my opinion.
Yeah. So the National Health Service in the UK, where I grew up, it used to be absolutely phenomenal. I still think it is. I've had some brilliant experiences with the NHS. Just going in, and you don't even have to like show any sort of ID or anything. You just walk in and you just get seen. It's absolutely amazing. However, I do realize that now there's a lot of strain on it. So like there are a lot of negative stories coming out. Basically, it's understaffed, underfunded. There's a lot of private healthcare now in the UK, which runs alongside it. Well, I guess which is an option if you do have the privilege. But at the same time, again, I might just have been naive as a child, but I swear that the private healthcare wasn't a thing when I was a kid growing up in the UK. It was just like everyone just went to the doctor and it was free. And, we just all took that for granted that it was free. But now there's a lot of complaints about the NHS now. But I think that's just because it's run terribly. And like, again, corporate interests have sort of made it really rubbish. And the healthcare here is free, and it's very awesome. Like I say, that all the state of the art like medical equipment everywhere, and I don't know, compared to the UK, from what I hear, the healthcare here is better than the UK. But again, it's still wildly superior in the UK than, like, I heard the number one cause of bankruptcy in the US is a medical emergency, a medical issue, which is wild. That's so foreign to me. That's so absolutely bonkers. What do you think of that?
And the crazy thing about that is that a lot of people rely on the fact that they can just, file for bankruptcy in the US. Because like I have cousins that live in the US. And my cousin regularly talks about she has insurance, and her copay just for her insurance is more than what some of her friends who don't have insurance pay just for their medical treatment, because they know they will never, ever get the amount of money out of the person who doesn't have insurance that the procedure actually costs. So like my cousin went for like, she had her appendix out. It was like $1,500 for a copay in order to have the stay in the hospital and everything. And like a friend of hers, same procedure, it was like $500. And she's just like, why is my copay more? Like, so in the US, I think that like you still get treatment because they can't turn you away, because that's what, I can't remember what it's called, but they're like socialized. They have a socialized healthcare arm kind of thing. You just get sent to the shittiest hospitals kind of thing. But in an area where there's only one hospital, you get treated at the exact same center. And then the people with the insurance are paying for the people who don't have insurance, because the hospital charges the people without insurance a fraction of what they charge the insurance companies, which is also another thing that in Canada, at least, there's like massive insurance, like not like malpractice, but it's like, I went to get my, as an example, I went to get my.
Sorry, everyone. I think the satellites are. Elon Musk is like
totally
taking a few satellites down. I don't know what's going on, but I'm back in the room.
Yeah. Just as an example of like the insurance sort of like malpractice that goes on here, I went to get a quote for my vehicle to get fixed, and I said I wasn't going through insurance at one place. And then they gave me a quote for the work. And then I went back a couple days later and said, oh, I'm actually going to go through insurance because the insurance company said that they would cover it. And then I told the insurance company to fax me what the quote was. It was 3 times for the exact same thing, what they were going to charge me without insurance. And I think that's horrible because that is creating the sort of like impetus for insurance companies to deny you. And for wheelchairs and all the other things, they charge insurance companies way more than they would just charge an individual. My wheelchair through an insurance company was like 15,000. And then my friend for like the same wheelchair was charged 9,000. And I'm just like, this needs to stop. Like, it just needs to stop.
Yeah, that is crazy. Like I can see the incentive, like the incentive structure is wrong. Like for example, if so the garage doesn't want to rip you off like for the car repairs, but they also incentivize to charge more if the insurance are paying. So I can see like, and then the insurance company are going to charge your premium next year when you go to reinsure more because it's going to cost you more instead of just everyone. It's just wild, isn't it? All the incentives are just backwards.
I also think that there's like this like thing in society where like more money is better. And yes, I do agree. You can't help others if you don't have some sort of money and privilege. You can't pull people up from like, dire circumstances if you don't have any money to help them. But I also think that there's got to be a level of, I just like all of the MLM companies and things like that, where they charge astronomical amounts for the product because every person along the chain of like, pyramid scheme, for lack of a better word, needs to make their cut. And so the end user is the one with the least amount of money paying astronomical amounts of money for a product that they're promised is going to change their life in some way, just so that all of these people who go to these conferences and like, hurrah, hurrah, we're all millionaires. And it's really off of the backs of all of these people who are the poorest people and the most desperate. And I feel like that is like something that I have like a negative thing about that. And I'm trying to change it a little bit. I just don't know. I don't know what the balance is there because I don't want to be poor, but I just don't want to be like a person that takes advantage of other people in desperate situations in order to make money. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to get a feel of the temperature in the room, right? So Luigi Mangione, let's get a show of thumbs up or thumbs down in the comments. Is he a hero or a villain? I feel like
or somewhere in the middle.
I mean, he's probably somewhere in the middle for me, to be honest. I think it's interesting that we're talking about this. Like, it's definitely sparked a lot of conversations that are along these lines because of it. But actually, the act of him being like so methodical, and he 3D printed his own gun, and he like scribed on the shell casings, and then like the video and everything was just so captivating. I think it's like quite a cool story. He's got like a real big following now, and I think like the act of him doing that has just spoken to like a lot of people. We've already got 1 thumbs up from the comments.
Yeah, I know. I see that. I definitely think that there's room for vigilantism in society. Like things would never change if there weren't people willing to make bold and sometimes very illegal sort of moves in order to make their point. But I just am like, I have a really hard time because I see like people like Gandhi and people like that refuse to do anything violent and made massive gains just by not giving up. But is there a lot of luck in those kinds of things? I don't know. Or not. Nelson Mandela spending however many years in jail. That's a patience a lot of people don't have.
Yeah, there was a solid argument to be said for Brian Thompson, who was the CEO that got capped, that through policies that he'd put forward personally, he was responsible for thousands of deaths. But he just, not quite so cold as like, the bullet in the head.
And I think that that's one of the things that like I have a really hard time with is that there are people that are responsible for thousands of deaths and that they go home and sleep like a baby because they don't pull the trigger necessarily, right? And in the companies that they have, they preach that it's like Coca-Cola, for example. Like, I don't think that there's anybody on the planet that thinks drinking a whole bunch of, soda is good for anybody's health. Yeah,
Mm.
should it be available so that you can have it here and there? But I don't know. I just don't know that like the CEOs of those companies and the people who are, you know, um engineering flavoring so that they're addictive and all of these things, like is that moral? And if somebody dies from diabetes, like who's responsible for that? The government, the food companies, like what is it? And probably a whole bunch of them. But yeah, you're right. He probably did have a lot of deaths on his hands and didn't even think about it. Are you frozen again?
Honestly, Elon, sort it out. I'm paying you 40 euros a month, pal.
That's
I
so
want
funny.
a solid stream of satellites, please. You know.
Yeah. I'll bring up something that I kind of went through this weekend that's along the same like vein as this conversation. Not quite as like, dire or like sad, but I went to a workshop this weekend and it was a very high value to me, and it ultimately was a sales pitch for a high ticket mentorship program in real estate investing, because I'm like trying to figure out if I want to do something with real estate investing. I really would like to try and help the accessible housing crisis in my area. So I'm trying to learn about real estate investing and see if I can do something to increase the amount of accessible units in my area. So I went to this workshop and I didn't end up paying for the workshop because it was a paid thing. And I was just like, I'm not going to pay for it. And then I got gifted a ticket. So I was like, oh, this is cool. It was meant to be. And the weekend was literally amazing. I don't know why the host like glommed onto me, but he called my name so many times out of like the 100 people that were there. I got to talk. I got to ask so many questions. And it was just like a really cool and really high value weekend. But I struggle morally with like the amount of money he's charging for his coaching programs. They're small, intimate coaching programs, but like the coaching program he was selling was $16,000, which is not a small amount of money. That's like half of somebody's yearly wage for like
Mm.
the average in Canada, which is crazy. And I could never afford that ever. So like, and they were like, oh, they were so great to me and I learned so much. And he gave up like 12 hours of his life to do this like coaching over the weekend and answered anybody's question. Like he didn't have any like questions that were off limits. Oh no, you can only learn that in the program. He would answer it. So he was really good and I got such a good vibe from him. But I'm like, how can somebody be like so, I get such a good vibe from them, but then he charges
Yeah.
so much money for his coaching. And he answered the question because like he's like, people said, why do you charge so much for your coaching? And he was just like, because people will never ever pull themselves out of something if you just give stuff away for free, which is true. I did lots of nutrition coaching for free and people just wanted me to give them meal plans and do everything for them. And it was horrible because they were just like, oh, this is free. She's coaching me for free. She can do everything and I don't have to do anything. And then when I started charging some money for it, then people were more accountable. They took it more seriously. So I do think that there's like a level of that. I just have a really hard time morally reconciling the two. And so I don't know
Yeah.
what you think about that in terms of like how much people charge for their time. Is it like if you have a high amount of skills and a low amount of time, is it reasonable to charge an astronomical amount of money for your skills? If you provide high value, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think there's definitely something to be said for valuing what you put what you pay for. I'll give you a really good example. There's a Waking Up app by Sam Harris, and you can pay for it. It's a paid app, and it is absolutely brilliant. It's like a mindfulness app. There's podcasts, there's guided meditations. But if you can't afford it, you can just email them, and they'll give it to you for free. It's a really great subscription
Oh,
model where the people that do pay for it allow it to be free for who can't afford it. Now, I've had it for free for years, and Benji recently, I recorded a podcast with him last night actually, and he said, "Oh yeah, I've decided to pay for it because he's in a situation now where he can afford to pay for it." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And he said, "Yeah, and ever since I've paid for it, I've been using it loads more because it's valuable to me because that's money coming out of my bank every month." And I was like, "Yeah, that's wild how like it's the same thing, but because it's free, I use it. I'm like, it's less valuable in my head." However, saying that, I understand what that guy's saying, but he could charge 1,600 and that would be a wild enough incentive for you to follow the program. But 16,000, I think you're just pricing out the poor people. Basically, you're just, I guess, like why like fancy hotels and fancy restaurants charge so much. It's to keep the riffraff out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe that's why.
I think that there's part of that. Like I think he wants people that have motivation enough to take that money. But when I see those kinds of amounts of money, I see people going, "This is going to change my life. I know I can do something for it," and going and putting $16,000 on a credit card. And I
Oh
wonder
yeah.
how many people take $16,000 out in debt, never use the program, and then this guy is living this lavish life that he is like very proud of, but on the backs of these people that are now farther in debt and potentially more desperate than they were before. So like I have a really hard time with that aspect of selling anything, which is why I've been doing my YouTube channel for years and have had this like dream of doing like courses and coaching programs that allow people that are newly injured, specifically newly injured, to be in a group setting and learn together, learn from each other, have some guidance. I just am like, what do you charge for that? Because
Mm.
if you like add up the time, and when I was like, I was working with she's not really a coach. She's my friend's or my cousin's aunt, who is like a coach to millionaire business owners. And so she gave me some free one-on-one coaching. And she basically told me like the model is you have to charge one single person how much your time is worth. Because if only one person signs up, you can't guarantee that more than one
Mm.
person's going to sign up. It has to be worth your time. Otherwise, you're going to be resentful. You're not going to show up with energy and all these things. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. But then I was like doing it, and I was like, if I charge what my time is worth for 3 months of coaching, it would be $1,600 per person. And I'm like, to somebody who's newly injured, some people that might not be very much money. You know what I mean? They might be like, oh, that's nothing. I'm going to pay $8,000 for a wheelchair. And some people that would be nothing. But for some people that would be like, I can't do the coaching. And ultimately the people who are the most desperate are the people that I want to help. So I struggle very much with that concept because I don't know where there's a balance, but I know that like you can set up a bursary program where other people are paying a little bit more so that other people, like if they go through the program, they're like, do you want to fund somebody else that can't afford to go through, or I can get a grant or something like that. It's really hard mentally for me. It's so hard
Yeah.
mentally. And so I've been like spending my time trying to monetize my channel in a way that's still free to everybody else by using
Yeah.
brand deals and things like that. It's just really hard. So yeah, I don't know. It's one of those what's morally right and what's morally wrong. Because having money isn't morally wrong,
Yeah.
but a lot of the people that have money, I think, are getting it from people that are desperate, and they're selling it specifically to people who are desperate. Instead of being like, I want to help you achieve a goal, they're like, your life sucks. It's going to suck next year. And if you don't do my program, you're going to be in the same spot next year. I hate selling like that. And I'm like, if somebody says that to me, I'm like, fuck you. I will be better next year without you.
Yeah, there's a lot of grifters out there, and there's a lot of people that charge way too much. I think Tony Robbins is one. That's a little controversial take, but
It is
I
fun.
saw a documentary with Tony Robbins, and like he's quite clean cut, but this like in his like seminars, he swears a lot. He's got a very potty mouth, and
Yeah.
I was like, and he just came across as like a bit of a like a psychopath. Like he genuinely did. He was like getting people up, putting them on, like using peer pressure and social pressure. He actually got this woman to call up her husband and break up with her boyfriend on the phone because he was like, yeah, you're never going to get the guts to do it. You got to break up with him. And she was like peer pressured into it. And I was like, how has Tony Robbins got such an ego that he's let this documentary out and not been like, people are going to think I'm a bloody psychopath, you know?
Because
So
yeah.
yeah,
He's
it was wild.
That's what I mean. There's like all of these like gurus, and you can get like such a negative feeling. I will tell you the absolute truth. The only reason I started my YouTube channel was because I went to a free Tony Robbins event, and I was peer pressured into doing something that I was scared of. And I had to I pushed publish on my first YouTube video. So I'm like, I credit that event for but I have a lot of people that have paid for Tony Robbins events and not done anything with it. I myself paid for two $900 tickets, and then COVID happened because I wanted to go to a live event with my dad. And then I never went. So I wasted $1,800 on 2 tickets that
Wow.
I could barely afford. And at the time I put it on a credit card because I was like, oh my God, I need to go to this because I went to this free Tony Robbins event. And I was like, oh my God, it was very peer pressure. Like, you got to do it now. You got to do it now. It's like, you're never going to do it if you don't do it now. And those are total sales tactics. Like, I have since learned that pressure, telling people that there is only like they're half sold out. And it's just gross. It's just gross when people do that, because in one of the groups that I was in for the Tony Robbins event, it was like a single mom who had $0 to her name. She had just lost her job and she put every penny that she had saved in her life savings into the Tony Robbins event. And everybody was like, dude, get a refund. You don't have a job right now and you have to pay your bills for like the next 3 months potentially. And so she was like, oh my God, did I do something wrong? And like probably like 100 people under that thread were like, yeah, you absolutely did something wrong. Like, you can't, that's not a choice you make. She's like, but this is my future. And they're like, yeah, if you can't feed your children, there's no future. Which I was really like, the guy in the program that I was in on the weekend, like somebody asked, like, I'm struggling with these big issues right now. And he was like, yeah, don't do my program. He was like, this is not the right time for you. Like, you don't have the focus, you don't have the money. And like, dude, I don't feel good about taking so I was really great. Like, that was really great. But yeah, I've been in enough Tony Robbins events and I've seen the success of it. Like, one of the people that I met within like that like time of space when I was going to those events, he is literally now a bazillionaire. He's like so successful. He does like personal leadership for like big business people and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, he's amazing. And he's such a cool guy. And he's like very religious and like all that stuff. So he's like does things very morally and stuff. So I've seen it work for people. But I think for every one person that it works for, there's 500 that it doesn't work for and that have spent all of that money and will never get it back. I am a person that has spent thousands of dollars on coaching programs for business and whatever that are just sitting there because I'm like, oh, I need to do this right now. And so I'm very weary of like any coaching program now because I don't know. I just read this. I'm like reading this one book now. And he said, if most people that would be successful with a coaching program will be successful without it. It's the
100%.
The people who are motivated will do it anyway. And the people who aren't motivated feel desperate. And they think if they do this, pay the money, then it's going to make a difference. And really, that's just the easy thing is getting rid of the money. But the work is harder and they don't want to do it. So, sorry. So yeah, it's like, oh, weird. Morality, ethics, it's all cringy.
So yeah, I'm glad that we're on the same page with Tony Robbins because he's always struck me as a bit of a grifter. Like he just strikes me as untrustworthy. Like again, those aggressive sales tactics. I really question if he's helping people or just lining his pockets. And like you say, those success stories, they're amplified, but there's so many people that they just paid the money and didn't get much. Anyway, going back to what you were saying $1,600 Canadian for what? Is that the entire course?
Like for the course that I just went, or it's 16,000.
No. Sorry. When you were saying if you were to do a course, you'd have to charge a minimum of 1,600.
Yeah.
Tell me what that 1,600 gets you.
So like ultimately when I was like planning the program, it was 3 months of coaching because like typically when you're newly injured, you are within active rehab at least for a month and a half. And then you're like on your own for like a month and a half when you first go home, which is the scariest period of time. And so it would be weekly. I don't know entirely how many people I would have in the program would depend on how much access to my personal like phone lines and stuff like that. But at least weekly check-ins, if not every couple of days, because I want to be able to like set goals, reevaluate the goals, see how they're doing on the goals. And then in the group, like individual check-ins, and then in the group setting, it would be like, how is everybody doing? Who's learned what, who's has stuff to share. And then it would be like teachings from people that I know that are awesome within the disability community that have certain skill sets, like building an accessible house. So like things that are going to be pieces of information that are really critical for them. I would set the coaching program up so that weekly they would have calls and teachings from these people. So 3 months, essentially, it might not be weekly, it might be every 2 weeks. I don't know what to like overwhelm people, but weekly check-ins, group weekly support type meetings, and then at least every 2 weeks, like a teaching on something that's going to be really valuable to them with their spinal cord injury. So that was my idea. But yeah, it's really hard to feel good about charging people who are in a horrible situation money.
I don't think so. I think what you're offering is probably really, really valuable. 1,600 for 3 months coaching is, I think, very reasonably priced. And again, the people that can't afford it won't buy it. The people that can afford it will. And a lot of people have fundraising as well, you know, like around their injury, they have a GoFundMe and they're like, oh, well, maybe I'll put like 1,600 towards this course. There's a sense of community. I think it's great. I think it's reasonably priced.
Yeah.
And I guess the more
while I wait for him to come back in the room, the model that I actually wanted to work with. So if anybody is watching and thinks this could work in the US, because I tried it here in Canada, I wanted to actually set up a licensing sort of agreement with rehab hospitals. Sorry, you're
honestly,
back.
I think it just waits until I start talking, and then it's just like now.
Okay, well you can continue what you were saying. I kind of went off on a little tangent.
I was just saying that I think it's very reasonably priced. The people that can afford it will pay for it. The people that can't afford it won't. And I think there's a lot of value to be had. And if it gets more popular and you feel uncomfortable charging that amount, you could bring the price down. Like if you get a little community or whatever. I think you should start it. I think you should go for it. Again, if there's some dude out there that's charging 16,000 and then you're like, well, you know, you could charge a tenth of that and sleep at night, then do it. Why not?
Maybe, yeah. My original business model, and I tried to do this here in Canada, and I was met with like resistance from the hospitals, was setting up a licensing agreement with the local rehab hospital so that the rehab hospital would pay for a peer-led complementary sort of peer support program that I would lead with other people that, you know, were professionals in wheelchairs. So that's what I tried to sell. And the rehab hospital here loved the idea. They just said to get it actually paid for by, you know, funding through the healthcare program is going to be a hard sell because you don't have any professional credentials. And I'm like, well, I am a teacher. I am a teacher. And I was like, and respectfully, doctors don't know shit. So your health outcomes are worse without a peer-led program. And that's how I'm going to still try and sell it. I'm going to I just looked up all the rehab hospital networks in the US because ultimately that's what I want to do. I want to keep it free for the people who desperately need it. And I want to show that when you add peer-led programming as a complementary thing, your outcomes improve for the people and they go back to you less for outpatient support because when you learn from somebody in a wheelchair, it's way easier. And so that was my selling thing. I just have to get in a room and be like, if you give me I wanted to do a test program. I wanted to do a test program here. And I was like, if you just let's find the funding for it. And if we can prove that the outcomes have improved for the patients that have left in this time period, then I can sell it. We can sell it to other rehab programs. But yeah, it'll happen. It's on my I don't know if it's on my thing for I made my this year's thing, but
also I think that it would be it could be a good gift. Say for example, if you have a fun uncle, they'd be like, oh hey, listen, I got you this mentorship program. You know, because it might help you if you're if I was going through a really tough time and someone gifted me a mentorship program, and then I got to be part of a community, that would be amazing. You know, I mean, I think I think the idea is really good, and I don't think you should be put off by the potential price that you think might be too high. Like I say, I think that's the way the market works, right? If it's too high, people won't pay for it. If it's the right price, people will. Even if, like I say, that's how that guy gets away charging 10 times that because there's a market for it.
Well, and true, there's, I don't know if anybody follows her, but she's Paralysis Nutrition on Instagram. I have kind of a little bit of she's awesome. She's a very good nutritionist. She has a husband that's in a wheelchair. She charges a lot for her programs. When I tried to take her program, it I don't know. There was a conflict of interest or something because I had a nutrition certification. She wouldn't let me take it. But um, anyway, I tried to take her program and I paid, I think it was like $400 Canadian, which ended up being like $400 American, which ended up being like $700 Canadian. She gave me private coaching on nutrition, which I didn't need because I already knew a bunch. I just wanted to see if it was a good program so I could recommend it to people. But I've had people take the program and tell me what it was like. And it's very basic nutrition information, which I think is valuable for people in wheelchairs. But she charged like $1,500 for 3 months, which, isn't crazy, but it's very basic information. And she, so I'm like, if she's doing it and people are paying it, then
Yeah, like I say,
so
like people pay it. Not everyone with a disability is poor, like
true. I know lots of people with disabilities that have lots of money. So
right. So and then I think the more you get it set up, like you say, you could have a program where people on low income could get it for like I say, a cheaper price or something like that. I don't know, but you should. I don't think you should be put off by starting it. I think it's the idea's got merit. There's a lot of support in the comments section, so I think
Well,
you're onto something.
I appreciate that. The other sort of obstacle that I ran into with the hospital was they were like, well, we find a lot of people in wheelchairs to just volunteer. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are assholes. But I was like, you guys are assholes. You want people to come and do the complimentary programming, but you don't want to pay people with disabilities to do it. Like you'll pay a doctor, but you won't pay somebody that's like, so I was like, that's annoying. I'm like, you just want people to volunteer to get the complimentary programming, but you're not willing to pay somebody who has like lots of experience and knowledge. And I'm like, and you wonder why you have a hard time getting volunteers. So that was annoying to me, but that's just like a thing that I hate. I volunteer, like I still volunteer in my local rehab hospital because I think it's valuable for people. I just think it's annoying that they're not willing to give any of the volunteers like some sort of compensation at all, like a gift card for their gas or anything like that. Like some people are driving an hour and a half to come and do the, the programming that they're providing because they want to. But I'm just like, as a hospital, you can do better, guys. You can do better.
Yeah, there's a program in the UK called Backup. It's actually the podcast I recommended. And they did a mentorship program and they trained me up to be a mentor, which was actually really good. I thought that I'd already done like a lot of mentoring, like sort of, I guess, through the YouTube channel and stuff like that, and reaching out to people newly injured. But when they were doing the mentorship teaching, I was like, oh, wow, this is actually, maybe I don't know it all. It was actually really interesting. A lot about communicating. And I think one of the main takeaways was don't be overly positive. Don't be like, oh, I was feeling sad. Never mind, you won't, And I remember thinking, oh, I'm definitely guilty of that. Like I'm always like, oh, my life isn't bad. It's great. But people do struggle a lot with disability. In fact, I had a really interesting experience yesterday where I went full, like I had a huge roller coaster of emotions because my girlfriend came over and she was like, oh, because she's taken on 2 jobs at the moment. She's a private chef, but she's also a catering manager for a company, but she's just doing this one private catering gig, but at the same time. So this week's been mental, and she's like, oh, can you take the dog for a walk? I'm like, yeah, of course I take the dog for a walk. But that involves me getting the bike in the car, which is a ball ache, and it's freezing cold. It's like -5. And then driving to the woods, which is literally just over there. But because I can't take the dog down the main road, I have to get everything in the car to get.
You froze again. Get everything in the car. Get the dog in the car. Get dressed in your warm clothes. Defrost the car.
Where was I? Sorry.
You said it's a ball ache getting the thing in the car. And then I was like finishing your sentence. I said, you have to get the dog in the car. You have to get your warm clothes on. You have to defrost the car.
Thank you. Then we get down to the woods and it's like really sludgy, and like as I'm cycling, the wheels are like flicking mud all up on my elbows, and like I'm got like my jacket. It's not like new, but it's the first time it's got dirty, so it's like my new jacket's got dirty. And I was just really pissed off, and I was just like, oh my God. And I was looking at the able-bodied folk, and I was just like, look at you guys. You've got it so easy. Just the only thing that's getting dirty is your shoes, and I just remember thinking how hard my life was with a disability and how much it sucked. And it was interesting because when I first entered the Duresh, you sort of go down where the river flows, so it's ever so slightly downhill. And I was freezing, my fingers were cold, and I was just so grumpy. And I was really putting a lot of emphasis on my disability, making me unhappy. And then weirdly enough, coming back, I had to pedal like really hard. So obviously, as my body temperature was increasing, the endorphins were releasing. By the time I got back to the car, I actually didn't feel that bad. So I was like, oh, I actually feel a bit better. And I was really glad that I got outside my comfort zone. I realized there were some obstacles, but I overcame them. I realize how lucky I am, because while there are a lot more obstacles for us to get outside, especially when the weather's colder, I managed to do it. I got a little bit of sun on my face. I got a little bit of exercise. The dog got a walk, and all in all, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm actually really grateful that overall. And then also, I was imagining that able-bodied people have no problems. I'm like, oh, look at these able-bodied people, problem-free. The lot of them, they have no idea what it's like, and a lot of, like, as you know, there are a lot of able-bodied people whose lives absolutely suck. And on the whole, my life is pretty good. And generally, I'm quite a chipper person. I'm very happy, generally speaking, very
Yeah.
content a lot of the time. So my brain chemistry is like pretty spot on. And I started to like reframe my experience with gratitude. And then I was like, oh, do you know what, man? There's not a lot of able-bodied people that like have as much gratitude as I do, like for life. So, maybe I am actually really lucky. Instead of like at the beginning of my journey, I was like, oh, woe is me. The world's against me. Being in a wheelchair sucks. And then I was like, oh, actually, I'm pretty happy. So it was like a whole round trip of emotions, getting
Yeah.
the dog out for a walk. But it was, yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that like I think is the most valuable skill as somebody that has a disability is just riding those really crazy ass waves of emotion, because they can go like up and down. It's like, being on a surfboard, you like crash and you're like under the water and you feel like you're drowning, and then you like get back up and you're like, there's a wicked wave and you're gonna like ride it and it's so fun. And there's like so many unique opportunities to feel just crazy shit when you have a disability. And I think not letting the like moment of frustration take over the rest of your day is so important, because there are little moments of frustration all the time where like spasticity fucks something up, or you're transferring and you get like your pants dirty for like an event that you're going to, and you're like, Jesus Christ, now I don't have any other clothes and I'm going to this fancy event and my pants are dirty because it's friggin' muddy outside and it's wintertime, there's sand everywhere. Or like, yeah, just like peeing my pants because I come in the house and I have to clean off my tires before I can go to the bathroom. And it's like all these little things. But then ultimately you're just like, there's no happiness like staying in comfort. And I think like having the ability to struggle and maintain like happiness is the thing that actually builds the most confidence in the end. Cause I don't know. And just doing it with a positive attitude.
I actually recorded a video yesterday while it was fresh, like just completely outpouring my emotions. I went through the grump stage while recording, and then like came full circle. And I'll probably chuck that on the Patreon later. I found actually it's quite nice putting videos on the Patreon, because I know that not many people will watch them. So I kind of like am brutally honest in there. I'm just like, oh, this maybe 2 or 3 people will watch this. So it's interesting, like, but and it's also inspiring me to create, because I know that people are sort of like contributing towards it. But so yeah, I recorded a video like capturing that entire moment yesterday, which was kind of funny, because I can't, like when you're grumpy, you kind of want to stay grumpy, but I just remember like as the endorphins were like coming up, I was like, oh god damn it, I'm starting to feel better already.
That's like when you try and make a kid smile that's grumpy. They're like, I don't want to. No, don't make me smile. And then when you make them laugh, they like can't help it. You like tickle them. Yeah, it's inevitable. Like when you smile or be happy. I was like solidly trying to stay angry at Joe for like 2 days, and I was trying to figure out like everything I could stay angry at him for. And then he cleaned my bathroom, like scrubbed the floor, my shower and everything. I was like, oh, I still want to stay mad at you. So I felt like going in there and being like, you did a shit job. But then I was like, I really am super glad that he cleaned my bathroom, because it's like annoying to clean the shower. So I was like way happier. You're frozen again. What is happening with your internet?
Oh, we're back again. I thought.
Yeah, you're back.
So yeah, I was a little bit annoyed at Chris earlier, actually, but it was weird. But tell me why you were annoyed at Joe. I get fascinated by these little episodes.
Now I'm like, I have to try and remember. See, this is like the thing. Like sometimes you're like just annoyed for no reason whatsoever. Okay, well, this is the thing that actually started the stupid fight. So, we were talking about, we were playing a game, and Jamie has like a tendency to like pick scabs and stuff like that, like I do. And so I was just sharing how, like, I'm like, you got an OCD tendency from me because I have like OCD type anxiety things and stuff. And I was like, you probably got it from both sides because Joe's dad has like, certain tendencies like that too. Like, we're very similar in that way. Um, and so I was like, you got it from both sides, but Joe's dad is not his biological dad. And I always forget that because they're so similar. And so I was like, oh, never mind. You couldn't have gotten it genetically from them. Joe's like, OCD, mental health things are absolutely not genetic. It's all learned and couldn't possibly be genetic, or couldn't possibly, be genetic. And so I was like, what? I'm like, where's your evidence for that? And he's like, I don't need any evidence. He's like, it's just my opinion. And it like irritated me because there's certain things that I've read more about than him. I have anxiety. I have OCD. I have all these like health anxiety things. And so I've read quite a bit about it, and there's definitely some sort of genetic component, but he believes that everything in science will be disproved at some point. And so no evidence is valid, only experience, your own life experience is valid. And I'm like, okay, well, that's bullshit. Sorry. But he got super mad because whenever he talks like that, then I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I feel like I am more educated in certain areas than he is. And that's one of them. So I was just like, okay. But then he got mad about that. And then it was just, I was just like irritated because I was like thinking, I was like, you're allowed to share your life experience and be right about stuff. And I don't try and prove him wrong. Like if he's talking about plastics production manufacturing, I'm never like, I'm sorry, there's no evidence that, making a plastic bottle is more successful with this blow molding machine than the other one. There's no evidence. It's gonna be disproved next year. Like, I don't do that. I'm like, oh, okay. But when I have an opinion about something like nutrition, health, whatever, he's just like, it's all bullshit. Doesn't matter what it is. It's all bullshit. And I'm like, okay. So that's what irritated me. And I was just like so mad for like 3 days, but I didn't want to say anything about it because I'm like, I don't want to perpetuate the fight. I just want to be very like cold shouldered.
So you were like passive aggressive, like, what's the matter? Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, Brittany, come on. You've got to be honest. So I was I was a little bit pissed off with Chris today, and I didn't want to tell her about it, but in the end I did, because it's really hard for me to be grumpy, and like, she's like, what's up? And I'm like, nothing. She's like, no, come on, tell me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, all right, fine. So what happened was, because she's overrun, like today she had a day off, but she needed to make these 2 birthday cakes for this catering gig. So I was like, oh, I'll help you. Like, that'll be fine. We'll make them together. It'll be fun, like in the kitchen, we'll put some Christmas music on. So I start like making cakes, and next minute her sister turns up, and they've gone to take the dog for a walk. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then 2 hours later, they come back, the cakes are made, and I'm like, what's the matter? I'm like, nothing. And they're like, no, something's wrong. I was like, well, I thought that we were going to make the cakes together. I didn't think you were just going to outsource it to me. You know what I mean? Like, I've been working away in the kitchen. There's actually 4 cakes because they were layered. So I made 2 chocolate and 2 vanilla. And then I was like, I came back and like all the washing up is done. There's cakes done. And she's charging money for these cakes. And I'm like, I didn't want you to outsource it to me. I wanted it to be a job that we were going to do together, and I just felt really used. And then she was like, oh, I'm so sorry, my love. I just wanted to get out in the sunshine. I haven't been out in a while. And I was like, yeah, well, whatever. And my back was hurting, and my legs were spazzy, which doesn't help. And then I laid down on the bed, and she was like, oh, do you want a massage? And I was like, yeah. And then she rubbed me, and then I was like, oh, I feel a bit better now. So.
That's funny. It's so hard, like from like an outsider's perspective. I totally like can see where her thing was like, oh my God, he's going to help me make these cakes so I have a chance to get out in the sunshine because I've been so busy at work. What an awesome, like, what an awesome boyfriend. And you're like thinking like, fuck you, you're supposed to be helping me. Sorry, you can talk about that comment.
No, I think no, it's great. Daz was saying that's called a stitch up, bro. Yeah, you're right, mate. So it's funny because like the day before, yesterday, I do the advent calendar thing, which I think is a very sweet thing, and she had lots of little cards to open up, and I thought they were little funny ones. And I said, oh, one of them was like, you can open a Christmas present early. And she was like, oh, amazing. Which one shall I choose? And she chose, I bought her like a very lovely, warm, waterproof pair of winter boots because she was complaining about her cold feet. I thought it was a very thoughtful gift. And it was really lovely. So I thought, oh, I've done all these wonderful things. I took the dog out for a walk, even though it made me grumpy. But, obviously it was ultimately
Yeah.
quite rewarding. I bought you some new boots. You opened up a new, yeah, and then you've just outsourced this bloody task to me, and I'm just in the kitchen making these cakes, which you're charging money for. I was like really annoyed, but I was like trying. I actually sent Benji a voice note. I was like, hey, listen, man. I don't want to do one of those things because I know it's a really horrible thing in a relationship to like keep score. But I was like, if we were keeping score, I'd be bloody miles ahead.
That's so funny. I think the other thing that like sometimes comes up in relationships too, this definitely comes up with mine and Joe's relationship, is his physically working at a job more than I do. And it feeling like that is doing more than me. And it's a hard thing when you're not the one that's physically going to a job and somebody else is, and then you share a life together and all the tasks in the home should still be shared. You know what I mean? But I try and take on a lot of like the home stuff because Joe does have a job that he goes to, and I don't have a, typical job because I have a casual job when I'm teaching and I can work a couple days a week. Or not if things are busy, like the kids have appointments. And then my other jobs are just totally like my own time kind of stuff, which Joe sometimes doesn't really see because he's at work and he doesn't really see like the amount of time that I spend editing and stuff like that. So that I think can be partially, she might be keeping score in a different way than you're keeping score, is what my point is, in terms
Yeah.
of like her physical output in life versus your physical output in life. Which is not a fair, sometimes can feel very unfair in a relationship where somebody has a disability. Cause I'm like, I can't friggin' help that I can't do that. And I try to make up for it in other ways. But I'm like, if I did get a full-time job and I was cooking and I was doing all the kids stuff and I was doing laundry and I was doing my YouTube, I would like physically like die probably. So I'm like, if you want to start cooking 2, 3, 4 nights a week and taking the kids to their things and like doing all that stuff, then so I think it can be like that's always a hard thing in a relationship, but seeing the value that each of you provides and trying to like, not, sometimes you do have to have those conversations, like if you really feel it's imbalance, but like sometimes you just have to be like, I'll make the fucking cakes. But it's also kind of annoying when you're making the cakes, you're like, where the frig did you go?
Yeah. So that brings up something like, so does Joe, how do you feel about traditional gender roles? As in, like, Joe is the breadwinner, he brings home the bacon, and then you do the other sort of stuff. How do you feel about that?
I actually subscribe to pretty traditional gender roles. I grew up with pretty traditional gender roles. Other than my women in my family have always managed money. So I guess that might not be a traditional gender role, but my grandma was like a banker and my grandma was like investing money in like 1930. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
cool.
or
Yeah.
not good, because she would have been like 50 when she was started investing and stuff. So my grandma, like when she retired, had hundreds of thousands of dollars in investments. When that wasn't like a thing for a woman to do. And my grandpa had no idea anything about money. So that wasn't traditional. And then in my family, my mom is a money manager and so am I. So maybe not necessarily traditional gender roles that way. So Joe brings home the money and gives it to me and I get to do whatever I want with it. So I don't know if that's a traditional gender role, but yeah. So I like it. And I think one of the things that like I've been really working on is asking myself if I would want Joe's life. And I'm like, no, I would rather have my casual jobs, things that I get to work on my own time. And every job I've ever had has been like that, other than when I worked at a summer camp in university. But every other job, I managed a nonprofit that I got to recruit my employees and volunteers for. It was all on my own time. And then I became a teacher and it's very casual. I can work if I have time and not work if I don't have time. And my YouTube is my own time. So I'm like, I would much rather have those jobs and do all the stuff at home than have to go wake up every day at 5:30 in the morning, go to a job manage, staff of 80 people and be grumpy all day. So
Yeah,
I don't want it.
How do you feel about blue jobs and pink jobs? As Daz put it, a lot of people have, they have those, like the wife will do the washing up, the man will take the bins out, for example.
That's basically like how we run our household, other than like a lot of men do things with like the car, like clean the cars and like gas up the cars and stuff like that. Joe doesn't typically do that for my vehicle at all. So my vehicle is my vehicle, but Joe does like blue jobs. Like he mows the lawn, he does the shoveling, he does like the fixing. He'll cook occasionally. Joe's not a big cooker, but he sucks at it, so I don't want him to.
And it sounds like you micromanage it when he tries it as well.
I do. He cooks breakfast. He's an awesome breakfast cooker. Like omelets are my favorite thing. So he cooks breakfast quite often, like almost every weekend he'll cook breakfast. And yeah, he does like the blue sort of jobs. Whereas I'm like, I'll do laundry, I'll clean. For Christmas, I get to hire a maid for the year. So I'm like, yay, I get to not clean, which is weird for me.
Sorry, you get to hire a maid for a year?
Yeah, I get to hire a maid for a year. That's what Joe got me for Christmas. So
no way, that's so cool. What a great mate. You complain a lot about Joe. He sounds like a top fella.
No, it's a good gift, because I was like, I can't think of anything that I want, and he was like, do you want a maid? And he's like, I know that's not like a really nice gift. And I was like, that's an awesome gift. I'm like, I want a maid for a whole year. I'm like, that's the gift that keeps on taking. So
yeah.
So I think like a maid for like a month is like $300 or something. So it's like gonna be.
Yeah. Joe's an absolute hero. What a legend.
Yeah, no, he's awesome. Like I said, he does so many, and he can fix anything. So we barely ever have to pay for any of that kind of stuff. Like anything on the trailer, my lift goes on because Joe does it. He rewires my lift if I need it. The lift in the garage he can fix. Like I don't know what it's like not to have a husband that can't do anything. So like if something breaks, he can fix anything. He can renovate anything. He can do anything. So yeah.
Yeah. So I had a conversation with Chris recently. I spoke about it while we were under the influence of some substances that certainly promoted honest conversation. And one of the things that has been an issue for us for a while, and I couldn't understand it, was because when I asked her to take the rubbish out, I'm like, hey, listen, even if I put it in the car, when we pull up next to the bins, can you just chuck it in the bins? Because, I have to get the wheelchair out the car. I have to, it's just so much easier for you to do it. Like, and I've been wanting to like ask her, like, why is it such a big deal for you to do that? Like, and she's like, it's not, it's the fact that you expect me to do it. And I was like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. Like, what, but like, it's so weird how you don't, that just never came out in conversation. It was just this like sort of this barrier that we'd always struggle with, that I was always like, oh my god, I can't ask her to take the rubbish out because she's gonna go mad at me. It's just this weird thing she has a problem with. And she was like, it's not that, it's like you expect me to do it. And I was like, oh, okay. Or she doesn't want me to. She was like, if you just expect me to do these things, they can snowball and I'll end up being your mum. When we first met, you were fiercely independent. And the more I do these little tasks for you, I don't want to become your mum. And I was like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. So do you think that can you relate to that at all?
I can relate to that a lot. To be honest, though, Joe's pretty good about those kinds of little things. Like I will get in bed and be like, I forgot to get my pills out of my backpack in my wheelchair, which is literally beside the bed. But I have to either turn my wheelchair around, which is really awkward for me when I have low balance sitting on a bed, which is high, or I have to transfer back into my wheelchair and then transfer back into the bed. He'll just automatically get up and get my pills. Or if I drop something off of the bed, he'll get up and do it. Like he doesn't even question it. If I sit on the couch and I'm like, oh shit, I forgot this, he'll go get it. But I also think that I'm like that too with him. Like I would never expect him, if he's just sat down on the couch, to get up for, if I'm in the kitchen, like, or if I'm wheeling around, to get up for like a glass of water or something. If he says like, hey, I'm thirsty, I'll be like, oh, don't get up, I'll get it. So I think we're both kind of like that. But there are definitely things that, like gassing up my vehicle or that kind of stuff, that is actually really hard for me to do, and would be super kind and helpful if he would just go and wash my car and gas it up. which he's like, that's your car. I'm not doing that. Right. So there's certain things that I think it's just a personal thing that they have, like, they don't want to be expected to do that. And I think for Joe, it's the same thing. Cause I've sent him so many like Instagram posts about guys talking about that's something I do for my wife. And now it's like on principle, he's like, no, I'm not doing that for you. So I think that's like the expectation is in that instance for Joe. So I think that maybe is something that she like got like a little dig in for her. That's just like a burr under her skin. That's like, no, I don't want to do it. Just like Joe with the gassing up the car and stuff, even though it would take him, even the amount of time that it would take him to drive to the gas station and back would probably be about the same amount of time it takes me to get out of my car to gas up, but still annoying.
So I guess the angle I was trying to get at was, that you were saying that you and Joe have like these little niggles, and to do with like, I guess, traditional gender roles.
Oh, I see.
Do you think that when Joe comes home, I'm not saying that he like expects dinner to be on the table or anything,
Yeah.
but like when you have those roles, do you think that there could be the reason why there's some conflict is because of there's like expectations? It's like if you make him dinner, you're like, oh thanks, and then all of a sudden it's like, where's dinner, kind of thing, you know what I mean? And you're like, hey, yeah, you know what I mean? So that like, yeah,
I do think that that the expectations is where we get in these things. And I'm trying to be, that's where I'm working on things as like a wife and a partner, is being okay with the expectations that he has, because I don't want the things that he has. So I wouldn't want to switch roles. You know what I mean? So I'm like, if he expects me to do things because he makes more money than me, or, we wouldn't be able to survive without his income, then at the very least, I can do the things that are easier for me. Like cooking is easier for me. And if he expects it to be done, then why get mad about that kind of thing? But I'm telling you, like I struggled with that for like a long time. Like I would just be like, F you. Like just because you go to a job doesn't mean I'm like, I have a harder life in so many other ways than you. Like I'm like I don't expect you to make up for the fact that I have a disability. I have to get up 2 hours before every one of my family members on Christmas morning, on whatever, because I have to do a bowel program that I do every single day. And I don't ever expect him to pick up things that are my things because I have a disability and a harder life. And he has a full-time job, and that's his, thing. And he wouldn't be able to survive without a full-time job. I make other sources of income that like, equal or mostly equal my half of like our income. So I'm like, I don't feel like I need to pick up more stuff. I do because I have more time. But it's like, yeah, I've struggled with that for a long time in terms of like our roles, but it's the expectation that was bugging me and that I had to like reconcile, because I was just like, why is the expectation bugging me so much? I had to like figure that out. And when I realized I don't really know why it's bugging me other than it's bugging me, and I wouldn't want to do a different role in our marriage. I would rather do this one. So just do it.
Yeah, I think that's like the way you can squash that conflict is just by reframing it and just be like, okay, well, there may be a certain expectation, but like again, Joe works. He's been out all day, like having a busy, stressful day. He's come home. Maybe it'd be nice for him to like have, a warm welcome. And yeah, this is my role. This is your role, and it's I guess. Yeah, I think expectations play a big role, and maybe reframing will help that, because ultimately you want to live in harmony, right? You don't want to be like, I'm right. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be loved?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's I think we do a really good job of like mostly coming together for those kinds of things. Speaking of coming together, we're doing this. Oh, I don't have the book right here, but it's like a book of 50 scratch off dates where like you don't get to see what the date is. I'll send the thing to you. It's very cool. You should do it. Yeah. But you scratch off the date. It tells you how much, like approximately, like just with dollar signs, if it's a cheap thing or expensive thing, it tells you what time of day. And then you have to do it. So like the first date is that I scratched off, and we put it in our calendar so that we're going to do it, is Joe has to be blindfolded, and I have to guide him into making a pie by only touching his hands. I can't give him any verbal instructions.
Oh, wow.
So it's to be fun. So I'm going to put that on my Patreon. So I'll record all of these things. And it's going to be like a special feature on my Patreon. So every time we do one of these dates for the whole year, there's 50 of them, then I'll put it on there. So if people want to go and see those crazy date experiences, then you can join my Patreon. And just the lowest
Sounds
level,
good.
it's like $2 a month is you get access to the videos.
Do you have do you ever think that like, oh, when I scratch it off, like it's not going to be accessible? For example, oh, today's one is ice skating, and you're like, oh, well, I can't really do that.
Yeah, I have thought about that, and I'll do my best to like modify it to something that's relatively similar. They also said that like each country is obviously going to be slightly different in terms of like what's available to you. So they just said do your best in trying to like modify it to fit wherever your geographic location is.
Yeah.
But anyway, I actually do have to go. We're
Yeah,
like
you
right
do.
at the end.
That's why we started early.
I know we
Start
started
early,
early.
finish early. And sorry we didn't tell anyone. It was last minute for me as well.
Yeah,
But
it's totally last minute. Sorry, guys.
but we will see you guys next Monday because Tuesdays is. Oh, I haven't even spoke about work. Did I speak about work? Ah, doesn't matter.
You
We'll
did speak
have
about
to do
work,
it.
but
Yeah, work's going great. We'll speak about it next week. But yeah, everything's going cool, and we'll see you guys next week.
yeah, we'll see you next Monday. Bye, guys.
Anything else you want to say before we go?
Don't think so. Just finish your Christmas shopping. Get ready for Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Feliz
Merry
Navidad,
Christmas.
Joyeux Noël.